From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report in Special English. Televisions were the stars of January's International Consumer Electronics Show. Known as CES, the yearly gathering in Las Vegas is one of the world's largest consumer electronics trade shows. TVs made news this year because they were bigger and better, with some of the most advanced technology ever. Some TVs used a technology called organic light emitting diodes, or OLED. They were thinner, lighter, offered better color, and were brighter than current LEDs. Ultra high definition TVs were also popular. Most of UHD TVs on display used something called 4K technology. It has 4 times more resolution than current HD TVs. And Sharp Electronics showed off a super high definition TV with resolution that is 16 times greater than that of standard high-definition TVs. Smart TVs this year were smarter. Many offered technology like voice recognition. One TV from the company TCL uses sensors and voice recognition to know who is watching. It then offers programs based on the user. In addition to TV technology, size also played a major part in CES 2013. Televisions varied in size from big to bigger, with at least 2 companies, Samsung and Hisense, exhibiting TVs measuring almost 3 meters across. Gary Shapiro is president and CEO of the Consumer Electronics Association, the group that organizes the show. He said CES has more than 20,000 products from over 3,200 companies. But it is more than a trade show. It is a gathering of the brightest minds, industry leaders, and those trying to catch a glimpse of the future. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. California Governor Jerry Brown wants to increase partnerships between his state and China. The governor traveled to China recently to seek Chinese investment in things like high-speed railways, renewable energy, and electric vehicles. He spoke at China's Tsinghua University. The governor called for a partnership between the United States and China to develop technologies to reduce greenhouse gases. Governor Brown met with Prime Minister Li Keqiang and China's Minister of Environmental Protection, Zhou Shengxian. Mr. Brown and Mr. Zhou signed a non-binding agreement to share information about policies to reduce pollution. Pollution is a leading concern in Beijing, where officials advise people to stay indoors when air pollution levels are at their highest. California's biggest city, Los Angeles, has successfully reduced the problem with smog that the city had for years. Its efforts included improving its vehicle emission standards. The state also offers special incentives or rewards for clean energy policies. Last year, California held its first sale of carbon credits under the state's greenhouse gas reduction law. The law requires big polluting industries to buy credits to release carbon dioxide, methane, and related gases. Governor Brown also hopes to create 20,000 megawatts of renewable electricity by 2020. California-based environmental scientists and representatives from environmental consulting firms also attended Governor Brown's speech in Beijing. They say rising air pollution levels in China make it a good market for technologies that help to reduce the problem. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report in Special English. China recently said it considered launching a drone strike against a Burmese drug trafficker. Na Cam was wanted in the killings of 13 Chinese sailors on the Mekong River in 2011. China's top drug official said the plan was to bomb the drug dealer's mountain hiding place in northeastern Burma using unmanned aircraft. The official said the drone strike idea was passed over in order to capture Na Cam alive. He was seized last April in a joint operation with Laos. That China considered using a drone strike is a sign of its increasing development of unmanned flight technology. It also suggests that China is seriously considering using drone attacks outside of its borders. Peter Dutton is with the United States Naval War College. He says China is moving away from its earlier policy of non-interference in international affairs. He says the country is becoming more active in protecting its interests beyond its borders. The United States has led the world in drone technology for years. It is known to use UAV, or unmanned aerial vehicle strikes, against foreign targets. In recent years, China has greatly improved its UAV technology. It showed off many of its new models at a recent air show in the country. One of the drones has a range of over 3,200 kilometers. China is also modernizing its global navigation system to compete with those of the United States, Russia, and Europe. The United States exports unmanned aircraft to only a few of its closest allies. China is now seen as an increasingly reliable, lower-cost supplier. Several countries have bought or built their own UAVs, mostly for surveillance purposes. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. China's Tianhe-2 supercomputer has been rated #1 on the top 500, a list of the world's most powerful computers. Experts measured the supercomputer's performance at 33.86 petaflops, or quadrillions of operations per second. China's National University of Defense Technology developed the supercomputer, which runs twice as fast as the #2 rated Titan supercomputer. That machine belongs to the U.S. government's Oak Ridge National Laboratory in the southern state of Tennessee. Tianhe-2 and Titan are part of the race to make supercomputers faster and more powerful. So, what is a supercomputer? A basic personal computer has one microchip at the center of its operations. This central processing unit, or CPU, carries out a set of commands as part of a pre-designed program. The first supercomputers had a few more CPUs. The number grew as microprocessors became cheaper and faster. Andrew Grimshaw is a computer science professor at the University of Virginia. He says many supercomputers today are called parallel machines. Instead of one CPU, they have thousands. These parallel machines are made up of many individual computers called nodes. They are positioned in one block. They use a lot of power, create a lot of heat, and require huge cooling systems. They also use programs different from the ones used by ordinary computers. Professor Grimshaw says anyone with enough resources can build a supercomputer to solve problems that require millions of mathematical calculations. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Persutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report in Special English. Researchers are studying how mobile phones can help to document the spread of malaria. The study is part of an effort to stop or at least control the disease, which killed an estimated 655,000 people in 2010. Scientists say malaria-carrying mosquitoes cannot travel far on their own, but they can catch rides on people. That is what Harvard University researchers discovered in Kenya. They found that people carry the disease east from Lake Victoria to the capital, Nairobi. How did they discover this? The answer is simple. They followed their phones. Harvard public health researchers studied the mobile phone records of 15 million Kenyans who travel. Researchers estimated the distance and length of each phone user's trip away from home. This information was based on messages to and from the mobile phone carrier's 12,000 transmission towers. The researchers then compared that information to a map showing reports of malaria in different parts of the country. The researchers then estimated each user's probability of being infected in a given area. They also estimated the likelihood that a visitor to that area would become infected. The result was a picture showing malaria transmission paths starting in Lake Victoria. Carolyn Buckey is an assistant professor of epidemiology at Harvard. She says one of the first steps in stopping malaria is to learn how human travel might add to its spread. Carolyn Buckey also says researchers are considering using mobile phone records in other areas to help identify malaria transmission paths. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. The name sounds funny, but the idea is no joke. A personal toilet called the pee-poo. Anders Wilhelmsson is the Swedish inventor of the idea. He wants to give poor people in developing countries a simple way to improve their lives. The toilet is a single-use bag made of environmentally friendly plastics. The inside is treated with urea, a chemical commonly used as fertilizer. A natural reaction kills harmful organisms in the waste. It reduces the waste to fertilizer that Anders Wilhelmsson says is safe for growing food. The hotter the weather, the more quickly the waste breaks down into ammonia to be taken up by plants. Anders Wilhelmsson says the sanitation process can take as little as a couple of hours or as long as 2 to 4 weeks. He is an architect and a professor at Sweden's Royal Institute of Technology. He became interested in the idea of sanitation after taking part in a research project on the social and political development of cities. One of the most common complaints he heard in developing countries was the lack of toilets. He worked with others to design the invention. He launched the project in 2005 and the next year started a company called Pee-Poople. The company is beginning production in Nairobi. It expects to start selling the bags in August in Kenya and Bangladesh. Full production could reach about 500,000 bags a day. Pee-Poople plans to sell the bags for 2 to 3 cents each. Anders Wilhelmsson says people can get back 10 times what they paid by using the resulting fertilizer to grow vegetable gardens. The United Nations says more than 2.5 billion people around the world do not have good sanitation. Many have no choice but to use the outdoors. Poor sanitation leads to infectious diseases that kill more than 1.5 million people a year, mostly young children. Jack Sim is the founder of the World Toilet Organization, a nonprofit group working to improve conditions. He says the sanitation marketplace and inventions like this one are the best way to help people meet a most basic need. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. You can find transcripts and MP3s of our programs at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also add your comments.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. Researchers have developed an experimental iPhone application or app that they say can improve the chances of survival from a heart attack. The iPhone app is designed to identify patients suffering from a kind of heart attack known as a STEMI, or ST elevation myocardial infarction. In a STEMI, blood flow to the heart is stopped because of a blockage in a coronary artery. Unlike other kinds of heart attacks, STEMIs show up very clearly on an electrocardiogram or ECG. Doctors use ECGs to measure electrical activity in the heart. The experimental iPhone app should help rescuers reacting to a possible medical emergency. They can perform an ECG and then take a picture of the test results with the camera on the telephone. They can then send that information ahead to hospital emergency room doctors. The iPhone app is the work of David Burt and his students at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. He says the app can help save lives by preparing doctors for the arrival of the STEMI patient as early as possible. He says doctors can mobilize their system so that they can perform a catheterization to unblock the artery or some other treatment. David Burt and his team tested the app 1,500 times over 3 American cellular telephone networks in a populated area. He said the app was successful within less than 10 seconds, about 94% of the time. The developers are now testing the iPhone app in rural areas where cell phone reception is more problematic than in cities. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report in Special English. Apple's new iPhone 5 is selling well in the Gaza Strip, although people are paying high prices there. The new phone reached parts of the Gaza Strip through tunnels. They were smuggled into Gaza before the iPhone 5 went on sale in Israel. Residents of Gaza are buying the smartphones for almost double the cost in the United States. The price of the phones has been raised by middlemen who bring them from Dubai through tunnels linking Gaza with Egypt. The iPhone 5 will not be available until December from mobile operators in Israel. Israel and Egypt have put in place a partial blockade of Gaza to prevent the flow of arms and weapons. But Apple's smartphones have been available for weeks in the Gaza Strip. Reuters reports the phones were on display recently in 3 independent mobile technology stores in downtown Gaza City. Prices for the phones go from about $1,170 for the 16 gigabyte model to $1,480 for the 64 gigabyte version. Apple launched the iPhone 5 last month. In the United States, the 16 gigabyte version sells for about $650, while the 64 gigabyte version costs about $850. Apple does not have an official store in Gaza. The Islamist Hamas leadership is in conflict with Israel. An Israeli newspaper reported recently that the iPhone 5's new Apple Maps application does not list Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Israel considers Jerusalem its capital. For Palestinians living in Gaza, costs for all kinds of imports are inflated by middlemen and smugglers. Hamas adds sales tax, at its end of the supply chain. But this has not stopped demand for the popular smartphones in the territory. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report in Special English. Ethiopia is one of the last countries in Africa to permit mobile banking. Mobile banking has proved to be profitable in the developing world, where many people still do not use banks. Earlier this year, the World Bank reported that 75% of the world's poor are unbanked. That is about 2.5 billion people. Banking through mobile phones lets people take part in financial services even if they are not near a bank. Until recently, Ethiopia and Zimbabwe were the only nations in Africa without mobile money services. Now, that has changed for Ethiopia. Belcash and Mbir are mobile banking technology providers. They have been setting up mobile banking and mobile money services in Ethiopia for the past 3 years. The Dutch company Belcash is working in partnership with banks to provide easier access to financing through bank accounts. Ireland-based Mbir is a mobile money service that works with microfinance groups where no registration with a bank is needed. Ethiopia's mobile phone industry is young, and wireless service coverage in the country is not well developed. The pressure on the wireless network is expected to increase. In the past 4 years, the number of mobile users grew from 3 to 17 million, and Ethiopia's telecommunications provider, Ethio Telecom, expects that number to grow to 40 million in the next 3 years. The government closely controls Ethiopia's telecommunications market. That means there is only one provider. Competition is not permitted. The National Bank of Ethiopia recently finished a draft order on how mobile banking services should be structured. This comes as international companies have shown interest in starting mobile banking services. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report in Special English. Probably the last place you would look for interactive media would be a graveyard. But a company called Espetos has come up with a way to remember lost loved ones. Its workers in Austria are placing what the company calls quick response codes onto gravestones. This means that anyone with a smartphone can get information about the buried person by scanning a code on the gravestone. The family of the deceased has control over who can access the information. The company works with the family to decide what kind of information to provide about the deceased person. That information might include picture galleries, streaming video, the eulogy, and the obituary. Mourners can access the data with a smartphone directly at the grave area, and that data can be saved for future generations. The company says it wants to make the technology weather and disaster proof. Espetos employees say this can be difficult. They have to use special techniques to protect the quick response code. This ensures that the code, which holds the data, cannot be destroyed or rubbed away. Vienna's Central Cemetery holds the graves of Austrian composer and pianist Ludwig van Beethoven. A monument honoring the Austrian composer Wolfgang Mozart is also there. There are no plans to tag these landmarks with codes, but that could happen in the future. Then, the thousands of visitors who come to pay their respects to these famous men would have more ways to remember them. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. Researchers at Johns Hopkins University's Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland, have designed a new humanoid, or human-like robot. Its name is Robo-Sally. The machine can be controlled from a distance and can be used to do work that is dangerous for human beings. Robo-Sally has 2 long arms with human-like hands. She can use her fingers to pick up small objects, examine them in detail, and do most things that human hands can do. Each finger contains a tiny motor capable of squeezing 20 pounds of pinch force, enough to defuse a bomb under the direction of an operator. Robo-Sally sits on a metal base with wheels that let the robot move around, turn in tight spaces, and climb over small objects. Mike McLaughlin is the main investigator for the Applied Physics Laboratory's prosthetics program. It was a difficult job. Mr. McLaughlin says the robot hand had to have many small motors to have the ability to do what a human hand does. It also needed to have human-like strength. For search and rescue duties, Robo-Sally will be operated by a person using a wireless machine that is far from the robot. The operator will also wear special glasses. The glasses will permit the operator to see the robot's hands. Mr. McLaughlin says this kind of robot could be used in what he calls dull, dirty, or dangerous situations where fine human finger movements are required. Mr. McLaughlin says the technology is not fully ready yet. He predicts that within 5 years, there will be some very big improvements. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report. Movies are all about appearances. Movie fans know that the action hero in the film Superman does not really fly. But in the movie Superman Returns, another visual trick is used. The man they see flying is not a real person. He is what is called a virtual actor. The first step in creating a digital actor is to have a real person stand in a room called a light stage. A computer records the shape of the actor's face. Computer scientist Paul Debevic is with the Institute for Creative Technologies at the University of Southern California. He says special lighting and 7 different cameras are used to create the digital image. Mr. Debevic is part of a team working to create computerized images of people, objects, and environments that look and act real. The light stage permits actors to be turned into digital versions of themselves. Similar technology could appear soon. Computer experts at the Institute are developing a 3-dimension video teleconferencing system. They hope to send a 3D video image of a person to a meeting room. The image would be able to work with the people in the room who would see it without special eyeglasses. Paul Debevic says 3D meetings would make it seem like all of the attendees are in the room together. How far are we from 3D teleconferencing? Paul Debevic says businesses will begin to use 3D video teleconferencing in the next 5 years. The Institute is using its light stage and interactive 3D technology to record video testimonies of Holocaust survivors for the Shoah Foundation, also at USC. The 3D images could be shown in classrooms and museums. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report in Special English. Delegates from around the world recently agreed on a new treaty on telecommunications and the Internet. The agreement came at the World Conference on International Telecommunications in Dubai. But the United States and more than 50 other countries have refused to sign the treaty. They are calling it a threat to Internet freedom. This was the first time that the international telecommunication regulations have been amended in more than 20 years. Back then, the Internet as we know it did not exist. Delegates at the conference in Dubai were divided over how the Internet should be governed. Countries like Russia, Saudi Arabia, China, and Iran are concerned that the Internet's naming system is governed by a non-profit group which operates from the United States. That organization is called ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. The discussions at the conference took place during 2 weeks of tense and sometimes heated debate among the delegates. Officials reported receiving more than 1,200 proposals from members of the International Telecommunication Union. The group's Secretary General, Hamadoun Touré, called the signing of the treaty a momentous occasion. He also expressed regret that some governments chose not to sign the agreement. Hamadoun Touré said he hoped the ITU would continue to work with those countries. Some observers say division over the treaty remains so strong that it is unlikely to go into effect in 2015 as planned. They say changes may be necessary to get wider agreement among delegates. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Technology Report in Special English. The iPhone has become one of the most popular mobile phones in the United States. An 18-year-old student in California has used his knowledge of the iPhone to create his own business. And he has gained national recognition for his work. Vincent Quigg is the Chief Executive Officer of Tech World. His company is like a hospital for iPhones. Vincent launched Tech World while he was in high school. He says his mother became single at the time, and he needed to find ways to make money. So he found ways to be entrepreneurial. An organization called the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, or NIFTY, helped the young man get started. Both he and his mother, Carla, admit that he had a hard time developing a business plan. The first time Vincent attended a NIFTY class, he quit. At the same time, he worked for the electronics store Best Buy. He says people always came into the store with broken electronic devices. He decided that repairing those devices was what he wanted to do. He not only re-registered for the NIFTY class, but he also won the organization's national competition for Best Young Entrepreneur. Estelle Reyes is Executive Director for NIFTY in Los Angeles. She says Vincent has an incredible gift for presenting himself and his dreams in a very compelling way that engages everyone to rally around him. His business has grown through word of mouth. Vincent says he now fixes up to 10 phones per week. He earns about $1,500 each month in sales. Tech World has 2 employees, and Vincent says he wants to continue to grow his business. His biggest goal, he says, has always been to work for himself. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.